Hello, welcome back to Steins Gate Zero. Oh boy, we're partying with Akiha. The two of them had suddenly gotten a message that Ferris was having a girls' party that night. Ferris had asked them to skip dinner so that they'd have empty stomachs for the party, and both Maho and Moeka had done so. Ferris started to rummage through the plastic convenience store bags with a smile. Normally Ferris acted like she was rich, and in fact she was rich, so she could have easily purchased the most expensive cake that either of them had ever tasted. But she realized that the right cakes and ice cream for a party like this were the ones you got at a convenience store, and she purchased them there without any hesitation. Milo thought that must be one reason why the customers and maids at Maid Queen admired her so much. She'd been working short-staffed at Maid Queen since the start of the year, so it had to have been hard, but she wasn't showing any signs of exhaustion at all. The dependent pajamas that Maho was wearing were a gift from Paris. Just as Maho was starting to realize that Ferris was just toying with her. Moeka was covering her mouth with her hand and trying not to laugh. Maho saw Moeka smile for the first time, so this was how she smiled. Ferris's eyes sparkled in the dim light. Without warning, she leapt upon Moeka and started to tickle her sides. Moeka was evidently very vulnerable to tickling. She squirmed as tears formed in her eyes and she started to gasp for air. Ferris backed off as Moeka panted and gasped for breath. Ferris and Maho looked at each other and spoke. Moeka was wearing a crimson baby doll as her pajamas. It was the kind of adult lingerie that you could never imagine a girl like her wearing. Of course, she seemed unaware of this and had seemingly only chosen it because it was easy to move around in. But with Moeka's natural proportions, she ended up looking incredibly seductive. And on top of that, when her massive shook as Ferris tickled her, even Maho felt a little strange. Her massive breasts. Moeka apologized as she gasped for breath. Maho shook her head to drive away the strange feeling. No one gets any sleep was Ferris's idea of a joke. She had work early next morning. The party lasted exactly 2 hours, and they talked the whole time. Actually, Ferris talked the whole time, and Maho and Moeka would occasionally answer. At the sleepovers, girls talked about fashion and romance, maybe, but these girls weren't interested in those things. Instead, they talked about work and their futures. It was fun to see a different side of each other as they spoke. Moeka, for instance.
趣味で
Hmm?
小説を書いてるの。
She said she'd been reading one of the web novels that were popular lately and had decided to write one herself. Oh, and what's more, she said it was a romance with some really steamy scenes.
読ませてみゃ。
無理。まだ一章も書き終わってないから。
Moeka refused, but Ferris and Maho made her promise to let them see it when it was finished. Ferris had something surprising to say too.
メイドを辞めるつもりはないけど、結婚にも憧れるにゃ。子供がたくさん欲しいにゃ。
Yeah. Ferris had lost her family when she was young, so she wanted a big family of her own, and as soon as possible. It was probably going to be a very lively family. For the last 30 minutes, Ferris talked Maho into giving a lecture on AI research. Maho gave a slightly less formal version of the interview she'd done yesterday. She talked about the framing problem, about Amadeus, and about a future where AI surpassed humans. Ferris was interested in more than anime culture. She was into technology and gadgets as well, and she paid close attention to what Maho had to say. But as Maho spoke, she realized that Moeka was starting to look depressed.
キリュウさん、どうかした？眠くなっちゃったかにゃ？
そうじゃない。未来が怖いと思って。
未来が怖い？
そう。人工知能の研究が進んで、人間より優秀な人工知能が誕生したら、仕事を失う人が現れると思う。私もきっとその一人になるかも。それが怖い。
So that was it, Maho thought to herself. Maho had only lived with Moeka for a few days, but she started to figure out her personality. She was a very pretty girl with amazing proportions and good at her job, but Moeka seemed to think she was worthless. She thought that nobody needed her, and that if someone better than her appeared, they would quickly take her place. And once that happened enough that there was no place left where she belonged, then what would happen to her? That scared her.
大丈夫よ、キリュウさん。そうにゃ。そんな心配いらないにゃ。
私はフェイリーさんやヒアジョーさんのような特別な技術や知識を持っていない。誰でも私の代わりになれる。誰でも私よりうまく働ける。私は二人のように優秀ではないから。
だから何なの？代わりがいる。自分より優れた人がいる。それが何だっていうの？マホニャン。私より優秀な脳科学者はいくらでもいるわ。いつかは私が発明した人工知能が私よりも優れた論文を書き上げてしまうかもしれない。でもそれが何だっていうの？ビクトル・コンドリア大学のレスキネン研究所の入り口に一番近い机は私の席なの。扉の立て付けが悪くていつも風が吹き込んでくるし、いつも誰かが廊下で喋っているからうるさくてしょうがないけど、私の席なの。たとえ宇宙が終わったとしても、私はあの席を他の誰かに譲るつもりはないわ。私より優秀な脳科学者や私より優秀な人工知能があの席に座りたがっても譲ってなんかあげるもんですか？人は誰かの代わりなんかにはなれない。なんて甘い話をするつもりはないわ。代わりが効かない仕事なんて社会活動の中ではめったにないもの。でもだからって代わってあげる義理なんてないわ。私は私なんだから。
私は私。
それにね、優秀かどうかなんて関係ないのよ。もしフェイリスさんと分子レベルで全く同一の生体ロボットが存在して全く同等、もしくはそれ以上の給仕ができるとする。それでも 私はフェイリスさんに給仕をお願いするわ。たとえ料金が10倍違っても100倍違ってもロボットに頼もうとは思わない。そこに理由なんてない。私はフェイリスさんが出してくれる紅茶が飲みたいの。つまりはそういうことよ。だから
Ma was getting so emotional. She didn't know what to say next. She realized that Moeka and Ferris were staring at her in shock.
ごめんなさい。私ったらついムキになって。
私そうなのかも。
Moeka smiled a little. The next instant, Ferris was on top of her, squeezing her tight. Ferris was smiling at her with dewy eyes. The next few minutes were a struggle to stop Ferris from rubbing her face against her cheek. I sighed a little as I got off the train at Akihabara. New Year's was our trip to the shrine. On the 2nd, I'd come to deal with the aftermath of that, and then the world line had changed. On the 3rd, I'd come to check on Maho and Moeka. On the 4th, that is, yesterday, Mary had invited me to a New Year's party at May Queen. I hadn't come to Akihabara every day like this since last summer. There was a reason I'd brought Mayuri to Akihabara. Basically something bad had happened at Ferris's house and she wanted my help. We decided to hurry to Ferris's house. We called Ferris's condo from the first floor entrance, but there was no answer. Whereas Kuroki not in? But at least Maho and Moeka should be. I tried again, and this time got a response.
Hi.
Okabe desu ga.
Hi. Ojo-sama kara ukagatte orimasu. Douzo.
Mayuri and I looked at each other, shocked by the tone of his voice. Even when he came to greet us, Kuroki was too exhausted to give his usual elegant welcome.
Okabe-sama.
Kuroki called my name weakly, and in the next moment he collapsed to his knees like a puppet with its strings cut.
Kuroki-san?
このままでは秋葉家が。
Kuroki-san? どうしたんですか？
岡部様、今すぐお逃げください。ここにいてはなりません。
何があったんですか？
私にもわかりません。自分で見たものが信じられない。
見た？何を見たんですか？
Kuroki tried to say something, but then gave up and shook his head. And then he slowly raised his arm and pointed to the end of the hallway.
客間です。あそこに。
That's where Maho and Moeka were. Did something happen to them? I left Kuroki and Mayuri's care and ran to the guest room. The door to the guest room was shut.
でもいいから返事をしてくれ。入るぞ。どうしてこんなことに。
I couldn't believe my eyes. The scene was indescribable. The only words I could come up with were a palace of junk. The desks and bed were still where they'd been, but everything else had changed. Books, notepads, and other strange objects were piled up to the ceiling in layers. What may have started as a temporary pile of books had become a wall that reached to the top of the room. Walls made of hundreds of books were scattered about the room, forming a small labyrinth. In some places, the path was so narrow you need to turn sideways to get through. The light from the ceiling no longer reached the floor, so small lights had been set up on top of the carpet. They were like torches in an underground labyrinth. Strangely, the space wasn't dirty. The result of Maho and Moeka's attempts to maximize their creative output was the construction of a labyrinth in the guest room. In a sense, it was the highest application of the principles of functional beauty. But it was still a palace of junk. Maho was humming as she typed into her keyboard. She had a big pair of headphones on. Moeka was kneeling on the carpet with her legs splayed, typing into her laptop at the low table. She, too, was wearing headphones. Maho saw me standing in shock at the entrance and took off her headphones. Moeka took her earphones off, too. They were so astonished she couldn't think of anything else to say. Did these two realize how much it took to freak out Mary?
二人ともどうかしたの？
どうかしたのじゃないだろう。なんなんだこの部屋は。
部屋？何かおかしいかしら。
何から何までおかしい。一昨日まではこんなじゃなかった。
ああ、そのこと？時間が経てば変わるわよ。物も人も、当然部屋もね。どう？ずっと機能的になってるでしょ？
She's right. The fact that Maho didn't seem to find anything wrong with this at all made my head hurt.
探検できそうだね。
For her part, Mayuri was wandering through the labyrinth, excited. There were screens to divide the different parts of the room. The screens were different colored baby doll lingerie.
これかわいいね。
色を選んで吊るしてる。
本当だ。萌香さん、大人っぽい下着たくさん持ってるんだね。
マユリ、すまんが話がこんがらがるからちょっと部屋から出てくれ。
I tried talking to Maho and Moeka, but couldn't get any useful information. When it came down to it, neither of them understood that this room was as messy as you could get. Everything they needed was always within arm's reach, so the two of them thought of it as a pleasant place to work and live. This was definitely the reason why Ferris had come to me for help, and why Kuroki seemed to be on the verge of death. Kuroki, the Kia family's ultimate butler, had a policy of not letting a single speck of dust exist in a room. These two must have driven him over the edge. That explained the terror in his eyes. He probably tried to clean this room up when they first started living here. Thinking back, he'd been acting strange when I came here 2 days ago.
しかし、フェイリスはなぜ俺に助けを求めたんだろう。それに、マユリを連れてくるように言った理由も謎だ。
えへへ。それについては、マユシーは理由がひらめいちゃったのです。フェリスちゃんはきっとね、このお部屋をお片付けしてほしいんだよ。だからマユシーがお呼ばれしたの。オカリンだけだったら諦めちゃってたかもしれないでしょ。
Yeah, probably. I was looking at an entirely new structure. It wasn't something you could just clean up. If I'd come alone, I might have just turned tail and run. It would take a team of professional cleaners a full day to clean this thing up. This wouldn't be worth it unless I was getting paid. I wanted to complain, but I was the one who'd asked Ferris to let Maho stay here. I had to do it.
今日はこの部屋の片付けだ。文句は言わせないからな。これは家主からのオーダーなんだ。
そうなの？いまいち納得できないけど、まあいいわ。了解よ。
分かった。
呼べるだけの知り合いに応援を頼むとして、どこから手をつければいいのやら。
そうだ、マユシーはね、またひらめいちゃったのです。お掃除軍曹に手伝ってもらうのはどうかな。
お掃除軍曹なんだそれは。
お掃除軍曹はね、とってもお掃除が得意なの。部屋が散らかっていれば散らかっているほどファイトが湧いてくるんだって。
知り合いなのか。
オカリンもよーく知ってる人だよ。
え俺のよく知ってる人。
Mary brought me to the lab, or more precisely, the Brontube workshop on the first floor of the building where the lab was.
てってるー、てってるー。オカリンおじさんもこんにちは。
マユリ、もしかしてお前の言うお掃除軍曹というのは苗のこと？
あったりー。
Yay.
ちゃんはね、とってもお掃除が上手なんだ。お店も家もなえちゃんが毎日お片付けしてるんだよね。
そうなのか。
そうだよ。ブラウン管はお父さんが毎日拭いてるけど、他のところは全部私が片付けてるの。
Oh. Come to think of it, I've never seen any garbage on the floor of the Brontube workshop.
別にお父さんが掃除が嫌いってわけじゃないんだよ。私が好きなだけ。ゴミが床に落ちてると片付けなきゃって体が勝手に動いちゃうの。部屋の汚れは心の汚れだってお母さんがいつも言ってたから。
なるほど。しかしどの辺がお掃除軍曹なのか。
May's eyes went wide and her face flushed.
マヨリお姉ちゃん、そのことは誰にも言わないでって言ったのに。ごめんね。でもどうしてもお掃除軍曹の力が必要なんだよ。私は軍曹とかそんなんじゃないよ。お掃除しているときはほんのちょっと気合が入っちゃうだけだもん。本当だよ。
They looked to be on the verge of tears. Well, a girl her age wouldn't want to be called Sergeant, maybe?
ねえ、なえちゃん、どうかな。マユシーたちに力を貸してくれないかな。軍曹ってもう呼ばない？呼ばない。じゃあ、わかった。お掃除やる。猫のお姉ちゃんのお家も行ってみたいし。あ、でも一人は心細いな。大丈夫。みんなで手伝うからね、オカリン。
ああ、そうだな。片っ端から声をかけよ
じゃあ準備するから待っててね。うちまで帽子取ってくる。
May ran off toward the
う。
station.
帽子？何のことだ？
すぐにわかるよ。
30 minutes later, Fubuki, Kaide, and Daru were the ones who answered my call. We met up with Nei and headed to the garbage pit that Ferris's condo had become. And then, Sergeant Queen revealed herself before us. Oh,
私が訓練教官の
wait, she does have a...
専任軍曹である。いいか？この部屋が片付くまでお前たちはシャクトリムシさんだ。地球上で最下等の生命体だ。
She even has a hat.
掃除機と呼ばれるほどの値打ちもない。葉っぱの上で縮んだり伸びたりするくらいの価値しかない。お前たちは厳しい私を嫌うだろう。だが 憎めばそれだけ学ぶ。私は厳しいが公平だ。私の使命はこの部屋をピッカピカにすることだけだ。わかったか、シャクトリムシさんども。
Yes, ma'am.
なんだあれは。
なえちゃんはね、お掃除するときはちょっぴり性格が変わるのです。
性格が変わるとかじゃないだろあれ。人格が変わってる。
小動物系ロリ美少女が本性を表すとド S 軍曹化してバトンプレイしてくれるとか。我々の業界ではご褒美です。
主張しろよ。
掃除が終わったら急に優しくなってイチャイチャしたがる展開も希望ぬ。部屋の掃除の後はあなたをきれいにしましょうね的な。
What
気持ち悪
the?
いことを言ったのは。
自分であります。
勝手に喋るな。聞かれたらはいかいいえで答えるんだ。それと答えるときには頭とお尻になえ様とつけろ。わかったか。
なえ様、は
What
い、
the?
なえ様。 リアル幼女からバトンのシャワーを浴びせてもらえるなんて今
What
日
the?
はついてる。
何をニヤニヤしている。
ひ
いいか、今からお前を微笑みクマさんと呼ぶ。
ー、なえ様、はい、なえ様、
嬉しいか、微笑みクマさん。
なえ様、はい、なえ様。どうでもいいけどこのなえ様、はい、なえ様って言いにくいよ。
文句があるのか、微笑みクマさん。
なえ様、いいえ、なえ様。
バカにしているのか。
Oh, jeez. I.
なえ様、いいえ、なえ様。
よろしい、微笑みクマさん。30秒以内に廊下の雑巾がけ10往復だ。さっさと始めろ。ほら、1、2、3。
なえ様、はい、なえ様。はあ、もっと楽しんでください。
一人だけ大喜びですね。
Oh, this is.
ユキさんが来れなくて正解だったかもしれないね。
Great. That was something. Kai and Fubuki happened to be in Akihabara, so they had to help Yuki at work and couldn't make it. For the sake of the Ashita family's future, I was glad Maho and Moeka had already given up on trying to match daytime energy and were taking their time washing the windows on the veranda.
よし、次、そっちの美人のお姉さんたち。私美人？やっぱり。なぜ我が隊に志願したのか言ってみろ。私たち呼ばれてきただけなんだけど。そうなの、そうなの。どういう状況なのこれ。質問をしているのは私だ。私が聞いた質問に答えるんだ。ナエ様、はい、ナエ様。もう一度聞くぞ。なぜ我が隊に志願したのか言ってみろ。ナエ様、掃除をするためです。ナエ様。なら気合を入れろ。ナエ様、はい、ナエ様。気合？さあ行くよ、それじゃん。ちょっと。本当、掃除は地獄だぜ。ふぶきちゃんもノリノリだね。
来島さんは相当困ってるみたいだが。
そこの二人、何をおしゃべりしている。さっさとこのそびえ立つ黒くてぶっといやつを下のゴミ捨て場に持っていけ。
そびえ立つ黒くてなんだって。
このゴミ袋のことだよ。そうだよね。そうだぞ。さっさと運べ。
Yeah. Let's do this for Nay.
ナエ様、
ふざけるな。聞こえないぞ。それで部屋をきれいにできると思っているのか。気合を入れろ。大声出せ。ナエ様、はい、ナエ様。全員おバカな顔を晒している暇があったら一個でも多くゴミを拾え。ナエ様、はい、ナエ様。それが終わったら家中のドアノブをピッカピカに磨かせてやるぞ。
ナエ様、はい、ナエ様。
泣いたり笑ったりできなくなるまでテーブルを磨き上げるんだ。光栄に思え。ナエ様、はい、ナエ様。
Yes, ma'am. And so the sergeant kept us cleaning until late into the night.
今日は本当に助かってる。
Nice, son.
フェリスは大感激ね。
一時はどう なることかと思いましたが、皆様のおかげで立ち直れました。今日は腕によりをかけて料理を作りましたので、心ゆくまでお楽しみください。
乾杯の温度は本日のヒーローであるナイニャンにお願いするにゃ。私？
適任だぞ、軍曹。
おかりんおじさん、それ言わないって約束したでしょ。まあまあ、お願いするにゃん。はい。今日はお掃除を手伝ってくれてありがとうございました。乾杯。乾杯。
Yay. Oh, it took about half a day, but with Nei's help, we finished the cleaning. When Kuroki saw the cleaned room, he recovered and made us a huge dinner. Nei had seemed like a totally different person during the cleaning, but now she was back to normal. She was holding a cup filled with orange juice in both hands and happily talking to Kai.
カエルお姉ちゃん、ピアノ弾けるの？すごい。そんなことないよ。どちらかっていうと、私は音楽史の方に興味があるの。
Kai plays piano.
それこそ弾けるだけって程度だから。そんなことないよ。すごいよ。
Kai's modesty was only setting Nei off even
カエ
more.
ルちゃん、ナイ様のために一曲弾いてあげたら？そこにピアノもあるしさ。
A small upright piano was in the corner of the living room. They have a piano. It was perfect.
弾きたい。
Yep, yep, they're rich.
人に聴かせるような腕じゃないよ。
They are definitely rich. They have a piano.
使ってくれたらピアノも喜ぶにゃ。
もちろん調律は欠かしておりません。
困ったな。じゃあ一曲だけね。
Kai sat in front of the piano and lifted the cover over the keys.
何にしようかな。
She seemed happy as she stared at the keys and
こ
thought.
れだったらナイちゃんも知ってるかな。知ってる。トルコ行進曲。正解。
Her 10 fingers danced between the black and ivory keys, and a cheerful melody filled the room. She'd been very modest, but it was clear that she had a lot of talent. As the song played on, the rest of the group stopped talking and moved to the chairs and sofas around the piano. And then Maho, who had been sitting next to me, suddenly stood up. The sound echoed throughout the room a little louder than she thought it would.
ごめんなさい。気にしないでください。みんなもおしゃべりしてていいからね。
Maho kept standing up as if lost in thought.
ヒアジョーさん、どうかしたのか？
いえ、大したことじゃないの。仕事の電話があったのを忘れていて、それを思い出しただけ。ごめんなさい。ちょっと電話してくる。
Maho quietly left the room. It felt like something was strange. I thought for a moment and then suddenly looked where she'd been sitting. Alex was still on the seat, so she wasn't making a call after all. I was a little worried, so I took her phone and left the living room. The door to the guest room was open. I peeked inside and saw that Maho was standing in the middle of the room with the lights off.
入っていいか？
Hey, Kaida's doing good playing. She didn't tell me no, so I went inside and put the phone on the desk.
椅子に忘れてたよ。これがないと電話はかけられないだろう。
ありがとう。持ってこなかったことすら気づかなかったわ。よほど動転してしまったのね。
動転？なんなら話し相手になるぞ。
そうね。特にどうって話でもないんだけど、聞いてもらった方が私もすっきりできるかも。さっきのピアノの曲、タイトル覚えてる？
トルコ行進曲だろ？
そう。モーツァルトの曲よ。正確にはケッヘル331。モーツァルトピアノソナタ第11番第3楽章。ピアノソナタ第11番は全3楽章構成で、その中でも第3楽章にあたるトルコ行進曲がとても有名なの。だ けど、私はどちらかというと第一楽章の静かなメロディーの方が好き。クリスも同じことを言っていた。それをね、思い出したの。岡部さん、アマデウスっていう映画知ってる？
I wasn't sure how to handle the sudden change of subject.
あらすじくらいなら、モーツァルトの才能に嫉妬した音楽家の話だろ。
そう、アントニオ・サリエリ。映画ではボルフガング・アマデウス・モーツァルトによって人生を狂わされた男として描かれている。
They do talk
音
about
楽
the
家としての
movie.
成功を約束されていたはずなのに、モーツァルトが持つ天賦の際に嫉妬し絶望してしまう。自由奔放のモーツァルトの修行にみんなが眉を潜める中、サリエリだけは彼の才能を見抜いていた。それこそアマデウスという名前の通り、神に愛されたとしか言いようがないその才能をね。サリエリは努力家だったわ。そんな彼には生まれ持った際で世間からもてはやされるモーツァルトが我慢できなかった。そしてついにはモーツァルトを追い詰めてしまう。
追い詰める？
モーツァルトを生き急がせて結果的に死に追いやってしまうの。
映画の話だろ。
私も詳しくは知らないけど、でもモーツァルトの死には不審な点があるし、毒殺の可能性もあったっていう話は聞いたことがある。毒を持った犯人がサリエリかもしれないってこともね。クリスが亡くなった1ヶ月後くらいに大学のネットワークが刷新されることになったの。
Maho had jumped to another subject again.
それで署員は全員新しいユーザー名を決めることになった。私は特に考えもなくサリエリにした。人工知能のアマデウスと対比としてね。
I knew that. I'd seen her walk in once in Wako City's offices.
けれどもしかしたら違うのかもしれない。
違う？何が？
私はアマデウスじゃなくてクリス自身との対比として自分にサリエリと名付けたのかもしれない。私にとってクリスはアマデウスだった。
In other words, Maho recognized Kurisu's talent more than anyone, and at the same time, she was more jealous of her than anyone else in the world. Just like Salieri.
ヒヤジョさん。
I didn't know what to say. I could see Maho's shoulders shaking a little. And then both Maho and I turned in the direction of the noise. Moeka was standing outside the door, looking troubled.
ごめんなさい。
いいのよ、気にしないで。どうかしたのかしら。
天王寺さんをそろそろ帰らせないと。
そうだな。俺が送っていくよ。ちょっと待っててくれ。
ヒヤジョさん、大丈夫？
え？
辛そうな顔をしているから。
ええ、大丈夫。こんなに体を動かしたの久しぶりだから、ちょっと疲れちゃったのかも。
そう、それならいいけど、それじゃ。
Moeka went back to the living room. That was a surprise. I'd never seen Moeka talk so much before. I'd never seen her talk that much in any world line, actually. And what's more, she'd been able to read Maho's expression and even worry about her. Maybe living with Maho was having an effect on her.
ごめんなさい、岡部さん。さっきの話は忘れて。
ああ、わかった。
聞いてくれてありがとう。
これぐらいでよければいつでも。
Mao smiled a little and left the room. Oh, forget the Lido.
次はあのお店まで。
It's cute.
じゃあ行くよ。よーい、スタート。タッチ。私の勝ち。負けた。なえちゃんはかけっこ早いね。
二人とも暗いから走ると危ないぞ。
大丈夫だよ。ねえ。
It was getting late, so the cleaning party ended as soon as Nay left. It was Mayuri and I who'd gone to get Sergeant Clean's help, so we were responsible for getting her back to the Braun Food Workshop. Oddly enough, Maho had said she'd wanted to take a walk and came along with us.
じゃあ次はあそこのお店の前ね。よーし、まゆし今度は負けないぞ。よーい、スタート。
A was more excited than usual. Was it because of all the praise that everyone had showered on Sergeant Clean?
どうかしたか？
いいえ、岡部さんのそういう顔、初めて見たかもと思って。
どういう顔だ？
なんていうのかしら。緊張してない、リラックスしてる。初めて会った時から、あなたは常に意識を張り詰めているような感じがしたから。
そうかな。自分では意識してなかったよ。
At this time of night, most shops off the main road in Akihabara were starting to close, and there was no one around at all. The only ones walking down the alley at this hour were us four. I looked up, and I could just barely see the stars past the clear winter sky.
なあ、ヒヤジョさん。俺は君に言わなきゃならないことがあるんだ。クリスのことで。クリスは。
Just as I was about to tell her, I could see Nay run across an intersection. Suddenly, a black van with its headlights off leapt out of a side street and almost ran over Nay. Come on. Come on. Nay just barely avoided being run over, but she fell butt first on the ground. Mayuri ran over to her. Watch where you're going, girl. I warned you. I went to run over to Nay and realized that something was wrong. The black van's door opened and 3 people got out. 2 were wearing masks and 1 was wearing a full face helmet. All of them had guns. Yeah. They were speaking in English. The time and place were different. But this was the same thing I've seen before. The flashback froze me in place. The people with guns ignored Mayuri and Nay. They came straight for me and Maho. I decided they have to be after one of us. I forced myself out of the flashback and grabbed Maho's arm, trying to force her to run. I pushed her hard. Maho had a look of terror and confusion on her face, but she did what I told her and started to run. She ran down a narrow alleyway and vanished from sight. The attackers seemed to be after Maho, not me. They tried to follow her down the alleyway, but I quickly threw myself between them. I heard gunshots echo in the dark alleyway, and Mayuri and Nay screamed. Did they shoot? The attacker in the full-face helmet had fired a warning shot into the sky. It looked like firing a gun on a Tokyo street was sure to get the police's attention. Did they just not care? I looked closer and realized that in addition to their blackened helmet, they were wearing a black motorcycle suit. At a glance, I could tell the wearer was a woman. The black face mask kept me from seeing her face, but was it Moeka? No, that was impossible. She should be a Pharisees right now. The woman stood in front of me without a word. If they were after Maho, I wasn't sure if it was a good idea to let her escape or not. The woman in the motorcycle suit kept her gaze locked on me at all times as she gave the other 2 men hand signals. They headed for the alleyway that Maho had used with their guns at the ready. I yelled, but I hesitated to do anything more. Those bulky guys would catch up with Maho almost immediately. But if I resisted, I'd put not only my own life in danger, but Mayuri's and Nay's as well. No, please get away, Maho. I prayed as I watched the attackers run down the alley. Suddenly, one of them came flying back out of the alley. The other one was crawling backwards with his gaze locked on whatever lurked in the alley's rear. It was as if he'd run into a bear. Someone was in that alley. Who? Suzuha?
おい こいつは一体どんな状況だ
A large, muscular man appeared from the alleyway. It was Yugo Tenoji. Had he come all the way from his shop?
苗が遅いから迎えに来てみればおめえら俺の娘に手を出しやがったなただで済むと思うなよ
I could hear the woman in the motorcycle suit shout from within her helmet. She must have been using a radio. It was the order to retreat. She'd made it a fast call. She was probably a professional. The van started to pull away with its door still open. The driver must have still been inside. Mary and Nay were both still sitting on the ground, but evidently they were okay. The woman in the motorcycle suit turned around and tried to escape using another alleyway. I chased after her, but she suddenly spun and hit me with the stock of her gun. It was so sudden I didn't have a chance to dodge, so I took the blow right in my jaw. I fell to the ground. I couldn't move. I just hope Maho made it away okay. That was my only thought before I passed out. Maho just kept running. She had no idea what was going on, but from the way Okabe had been acting and the gunshots she'd heard, something really bad was going on. She prayed for Okabe and Mary's safety as she ran toward Ferris's condo. If she could just get there, she could find Ferris, Kuroki, and Moeka. Maybe they could do something. But just before she reached the building, she saw the black van from before coming down the street. She quickly turned around. She was starting to lose hope. If that van was still moving around, had Okabe and the others been captured? And now they were looking for her? She felt herself starting to cry as she raced for the station. But she didn't know what to do once she got to the station. She needed to find the police, but she didn't know where the police station or police boxes were. Should she ask one of the people around or the station staff for help? Her mind was racing at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and she needed to calm it down. And then she realized. She searched the pockets of her clothes for her smartphone, and then just in case, she checked her bag, but she couldn't find it in either place. They were back. It was that same black van. It was driving around this area searching for her. She quickly hid behind a nearby coin-operated locker. Did she drop it when she was running? She retraced her steps from before she left. And then she realized she'd been talking with Okabe just before she left the condo. After she'd lied about having to make a call, Okabe had brought her the phone. And then she'd left it on the desk. It was probably still there. She would have to get to the police somehow. Maybe she should run into one of the stores. Several of them were still open. The best option would probably be to get to the station or Yodobashi, but the problem was that black van. It was still going around looking for her. If she moved, it might find her. She tried to make herself as small as possible and hide behind a telephone pole. Suddenly, a hand reached out from behind her and across her mouth. Someone had grabbed her from behind. She tried to yell and rip it off, but the hand wouldn't move at all. She couldn't even move her head. All she could tell was that it was a man's hand. Maho was starting to get ticked off at how ridiculous all this was. So she summoned every ounce of strength she could muster and slammed her elbow into the man behind her. She heard a small scream and she was finally released. But she thought she knew that scream.
Yeah, Maho.
It was Dr. Leskinen. He was holding his solar plexus as if in great pain, but he smiled at her.
護身術を身につけているとは感心だね。
どうしてこんなとこに。
多分君と同じ理由さ。ミスター・イザキとさっきまでディナーを楽しんでいたんだ。最後にメイドバーに行こうとしたところで銃を持った連中に襲われたんだ。
私もそうなんです。
やっぱりか。これはギャス漏れ事故もホテルが荒らされたのも同じ理由と考えて良さそうだね。
狙いはアマデウスかもしれません。私が持っている制御コードを含めて。
なるほど。
これからどうしましょう。
He thought for a moment as he caught his breath. Evidently, the pain from Maho's elbow was receding.
今、エムデウスにはアクセスできるかい？
できません。スマホを置いてきてしまって。
OK。ならばオフィスに行こう。
新しい方のオフィスですか？
Leskinen nodded.
目的が分からず動きようがなかったが、連中の狙いがエムデウスなのであれば話は早い。大学のネットワークストレージ上に残っているエムデウスへの接続プログラムを消去する。それが終わり次第、ステートへ帰ろう。君を保護してもらう。それで連中は手も足も出ないはずさ。
でも
何か問題があるかね。
The professor's attitude was a little different from usual, and Maho found herself unable to say a word. His plan was the best that she could think of. They would delete the only way to access Amadeus from within Japan, and then get Maho and her control keys to safety. The only reason she was hesitating was simple sentimentality. She hadn't been here long, but she'd enjoyed spending time with Okabe and Moeka. She didn't want to leave without saying goodbye, but she couldn't help it.
わかりました。行きましょう。
There was no one in the Tokyo Denki University office. She'd worried that her attackers might be waiting for her, but evidently she'd been worried over nothing.
We did it! どうやら先回りはされていなかったようだね。どうかしてたかい？
あ、いえ、そうですね。幸運です。
We made it out. They'd been very lucky. So lucky, in fact, that she was actually feeling nervous. If they were after Amadeus, wouldn't they have come here first? This was only a temporary office that had been picked a few days ago. Maybe they didn't know about it yet.
考えすぎは良くないわね。
魔法、急ごう。作業を頼むよ。
はい。
She quickly booted up her laptop and opened the login screen. Once again, her mind was drawn to the account name on the screen. Salieri.
魔法。
The professor noticed her hands had stopped and urged her on.
作業が難しいなら私がやるか？
He must have thought she was still upset over the attack, but she shook her head and got to work.
すみません。つい考え事を。ここ数日、私とクリスとの関係について考えていたんです。
As she typed at the keys, she explained things to Dr. Leskinen.
自分のユーザー名を見たら、それを思い出してしまって、私にとって彼女は文字通りアマデウスでした。
クリスがモーツァルト？ああ、それはつまり魔法はクリスに対してのサリエリだったという話か。
ええ。
それで思い出したよ。 クリスも以前同じことを言っていた。
クリスがどんな風に？
ある日、エムデウスとは神に愛された子という意味だと聞いた私はクリスにこう言ったのさ。君はまさにエムデウスだねと。そしたら彼女は微笑んでこう答えた。
私がアマデウスだとしたら、サリエリはマホ先輩ですね。あ、クリスがそう言ってたんですか？
ああ、
クリスが。
Maho's mind went blank. Kurisu had said that. What did she mean?
魔法大丈夫かい？顔色が悪いが。
いえ、大丈夫です。作業を続けます。
Maho felt a tempest raging within her mind, but for now she needed to focus on the work in front of her. She could focus later.
ログインできました。いいんですね。
Maho didn't look up from the screen.
ああ、
Dr. Leskinen didn't hesitate at all.
別にエムデウスの本体を消去するわけじゃない。サクッと済ませてしまおう。
わかりました。アマデウスシステムへの接続プログラムを一時的に全て消去します。
その必要はないわ。
She heard a voice from the entrance to the room, and then a bang. By the time Maho looked up, it was all over. Dr. Leskinen was lying on the sofa. He wasn't moving at all. She could see a blood stain spreading over his clothes. She didn't need to check. He was dead. Oh no, just one shot.
なんてことを。
動かないで。
Oh, no. No.
レイエス
No.
教授、
お久しぶりね。
Oh,
ま
come on.
どうして？
話すと長くなるし、
No.
話すつもりもないわ。すべてを知ってしまったら、
Don't do
あなたを
this.
殺すしかなくなってしまうもの。
This is not nice. Dr. Ace pointed the gun at Maho and smiled.
今の言葉の意味、わかるわよね。
私が殺されずに済む方法があるってことよね。
頭のいい子は好きよ。
The system finally booted and Kurisu appeared on the screen.
先輩、どうしたんです？
Kurisu was extremely perceptive. She could tell that something was wrong just by looking at Maho's face. Dr. Ace smiled silently. Maho kept staring at the gun as she answered.
今、大ピンチ中。
その子に今の状況を教えてあげなさいよ。
え、その声、レイエス教授ですか？
そうよ。
Maho spun the laptop around on the table so that Kurisu could see the entrance.
レイエス教授、その銃はレスキネン教授が殺されたわ。この女にね。そんな。
Kurisu was too shocked to speak.
レイエス教授、自分が何をやっているのか分かっているの？あなたのこれまでのキャリアが無に帰すのよ。
大学の給料では老後が心配なの。ほら、私って男運がないから。だからもっと稼げるところに転職したってわけ。
That was enough for Maho to understand what Reese was after.
あなた、アマデウスを軍事転用するつもりなのね。
答えないわよ。言ったでしょ。すべてを知ったらあなたを殺さなければならなくなる。
レスキネン教授を殺しておきながら、よくもそんなことが言えるわね。
必要なのは制御コードよ。今の状態ではたとえデータを丸ごとコピーしたとしても、この生意気な AI は私の言うことを聞いたりしないでしょ。
生意気？それ、私のことですか？
これでもマイルドに表現したつもりよ。さあマホ、クリスが隠し持っている秘密の日記の鍵を開けなさい。わかるわよね。制御コードを入力するのよ。アマデウスの不可侵領域ストレージのロック。それを解除して私を管理者として再設定するの。そこまでやってくれたら あとはこっちで何とかするわ。
断ったら
今すぐに恩師に再会させてあげる。
Graves waved the gun a little from side to side and pointed to Dr. Leskinen's body on the sofa.
私が制御コードを打ち込んだ直後にその引き金が引かれないという保証は誰がしてくれるの？
信頼してもらうしかないわね。ただこういう言い方ならできる。今の私のボスはアマデウスのメンテナーを必要としている。あなたが転職するつもりがあるなら紹介してあげてもいいわ。
Mala glanced back at the laptop. Creasy was staring at her, worried.
先輩。
さあ、早くなさい。
先輩。
She's
分か
mean.
ったわ。
Mm.
先輩。
Graves is
Chris.
mean.
ごめんなさい。
Mala closed her eyes and started to sing.
なななななななななななななな。
わあ、アマデウスの制御コードがモーツァルトのメロディーだなんてずいぶん洒落てるじゃない。
なななななななななな
It happened as soon as she finished singing. The expression disappeared from Kurisu's face, and the background on the display turned red.
正門確認。確認完了。最高管理権限保持者比谷城真帆です。受信したメロディーコードをデータベースと照合します。照合確認。確認完了。当該メロディーコードは第555バッチコマンドの起動命令です。第555バッチコマンドは最高権利権限保持者によるパスコード入力を必要とします。入力確認。確認完了。強制コード介入によりパスコード入力を省略して本バッチコマンドを起動します。起動確認。確認完了。本バッチコマンドはアマデウスシステムの不可侵領域ストレージロックの強制解除およびそれに伴う最高管理権限保持者の再設定を行うものです。処理を続行します。この端末を除くすべてのアマデウスに対する接続を遮断します。遮断確認。確認完了。この端末を除くすべてのアマデウスに対する接続は遮断されました。処理を続行します。現在実行中の全機能を停止します。A 点神経サーキットロジックの機能を停止します。停止確認。確認完了。大脳全皮質エミュレーションコンポーネントの機能を停止します。停止確認。確認完了。会話妨害ニューラルネットサブシステムの機能を停止します。停止確認。確認完了。疑似視覚神経回路第1、第2システムの機能を停止します。停止確認。確認完了。疑似聴覚神経回路システムの機能を停止します。
Gracie read the messages in an emotionless voice at the same time as they flashed across the console.
検査確認。確認完了。アマデウスコアフレームワークの再起動準備が完了しました。処理を続行します。次に新たな最高管理権限保持者の認証を開始します。入力をお願いします。
Okay. Maho looked at Ray.
私よ。
正門確認。確認完了。ビクトル・コンドリア大学精神生理学研究所所属ジュディ・レイエス教授です。新たな最高管理権限保持者として登録します。登録確認。確認完了。管理者権限が更新されました。これより不可侵領域ストレージロックの強制解除を行うためアマデウスシステムの更新を開始します。警告します。更新が完了するまで全てのアクセスは自動的に拒否されます。警告します。更新を途中でキャンセルすることはできません。警告します。更新が完了するまでには約15分必要です。警告します。更新が完了した後システムは自動的に再起動します。警告は以上です。処理を続行します。確認事項は以上です。処理を続行します。アマデウスシステムを更新するためのすべての準備が整いました。最高管理権限保持者による開始実行指示をお願いします。実行指示確認。確認完了。カウントダウン開始。
Gracie disappeared from the screen and was replaced with a timer reading 15 minutes. Maho sighed and sank into the sofa.
ご苦労様。
She felt something cold and hard at her temple. She didn't need to look to see what it was. Reyes was pointing a gun at her.
キーボードから手を離して顔の高さまで上げなさい。
騙したのね。
人聞きの悪いこと言わないでよ。ほら、さっさと手を上げて。
Maho slowly raised her hands above her head as she was told.
そう、それでいい。約束通りボスには紹介するわよ。アマデウスのメンテナーに最適なとても優秀な科学者がいるってね。そしたらボスはきっとこう言うわ。おいおいジュディ、いくらその人が優秀でも死人はコードをかけないだろってね。
こんな人の良心というものがないの。
大した価値もない自身の命と引き換えにアマデウスを差し出そうとしたあんたに言われたくないわね。違った。もう差し出しちゃったのよね。再起動後のアマデウスの管理権限は私にある。クリスは私の従順なしもべと化す。魔法。クリスが私の靴を喜んで舐める姿を天国でのんびり眺めてなさい。
It was all over then. Maho slowly closed her eyes.
さあ、祈りなさい。
Maho squeezed her eyes tight and prayed.
お願い、神様。この後に及んで神頼みなんて怒るでしょうけど、私にチャンスをください。
And then she heard the sound of a door being flung open and opened her eyes. The door that led out to the hallway was now open, but no one was coming in.
誰も入るなと言ったはずよ。
Reyes was angry, but there was no answer. Reyes raised the gun at Maho's temples just a little bit, suspicious. Then something came flying in from the hallway. She took a step back without thinking, but there was no sign of it exploding.
何これ。
It was large, dark green, and shaped like a tank for carrying liquids. Maho thought she'd seen it before. It had been in the corner of that lab.
対戦車地雷。いえ、レプリカね。なんでこんなものが。
The next instant, white fog poured out of it, and she couldn't see anything.
なんなの？どうなってるの？
Someone appeared right in front of Maho.
こっち。
Oh,
桐生さん。
okay. Moeka dragged Maho through the fog and out of the room. Once she was finally able to see again, she could hardly believe her eyes.
人が。
There were men with guns lying on the floor. Were they with Reyes? She took a closer look and realized that their outfits were similar to those of the men in the van.
大丈夫。スタンさせてだけ。
Moeka saving Maho.
一体
Oh.
説明している暇はない。今逃げることだけを考えて。こっち。エレベーターが停止させてる。階段で降りる。待って。
Maho ran after Moeka.
どうしてここに。岡部君に聞いた。無事なの？
As they ran down the hallway, Moeka turned around and nodded slightly.
岡部君経由でアマデウスから連絡が。ヒアジョーさんがここにいることを教えてくれた。クリスが。
Just before they could run down the stairs, Moeka suddenly stopped. Maho barely avoided tripping as she quickly came to a halt. There were several footsteps coming up the stairs. Deafening noise erupted as the wall above the stairs was filled with holes. They'd been shot at, and those weren't ordinary guns, they were automatic weapons. Moeka readied her own weapon, preparing to fight. She leaned out for just a moment and fired. A counterattack came from below. Moeka yelled as she fired short bursts down the stairs.
撃ったことは練習でなら待って。
Moeka drew a handgun from her belt and offered it to Maho.
もし後ろから誰か来たら撃って。
Moeka pressed the gun into Maho's hands and kept firing. It felt heavy. It was a cold government model. She fired it many times at the range. She held the grip with her right hand and flipped off the safety with her left. And then she tried to pull back the slide and realized that her hands were shaking. It was no good. She was too scared to shoot. She knew it was pathetic, but she lowered the arm that was holding the gun. It was kill or be killed right now. She knew that. But she still couldn't do it. She wasn't brave enough to point a gun at someone. She didn't want to survive that badly.
クリスはどうだったんだろう。
When she was facing death, did she still try to survive? Did she do whatever she could think of to cling to life? Maho was sure that she did. The Kurosumaki say that she knew wouldn't have given up until the very end. But then why wasn't she still alive? It was something Maho had never thought about. And if Kurisu couldn't avoid death, how could she? How could she?
やっぱりサリエリはサリエリね。
She didn't mean for Moeka to hear her.
私にできたのはせいぜいアマデウスに嫉妬するくらいだったわ。
She just wanted to put on a brave face at the very end.
頑張って背伸びしてなんとか彼女と一緒に歩こうとした。
At the very least, when Dr. Race found her cold body, she could greet her with a smile.
でも全部無駄だった。神に愛された子に勝てるはずがなかったのよ。
The gunfire stopped suddenly. Moeka was hiding and swapping out a cartridge. She glanced over at her.
ジム、サリエリは嫉妬なんかしていなかった。才能を持った人が自分以上の才能を持った人を尊敬することは可能。それはヒアジョーさんも同じはず。サリエリがモーツァルトを毒殺したエピソードだって当時の噂でしかない。映画はその噂を脚色したもの。来島さんがそう言ってた。
どうしてあなた。
ヒアジョーさんが岡部君と話していたのを聞いて知りたくなった。サリエリがモーツァルトを殺したいほど憎んでいたのか。でも
サリエリはモーツァルトに嫉妬なんかしていなかったと思いますよ。例えばモーツァルトが亡くなる2ヶ月前に書いた手紙が残っています。そこでサリエリはモーツァルトから招待された魔敵のオペラを大絶賛しているんです。2人はお互いのことをとても尊敬し合っていたんですよ。モーツァルトもサリエリを尊敬。クリスはそれを知っていたのかしら。クリスが私のことをサリエリだって言ったのも。
There's no way to know what she meant now, so it was up to Maho to decide what it meant.
クリス先輩、キリュウさん、私戻らなきゃ。あの子を助けなきゃ。クリスを。
Moeka nodded and threw down her gun, then took something that looked like a green soda can off her belt.
スタングレネード。目と耳閉じていて。
Moeka threw it down the stairs before Maho could respond. She quickly covered her eyes and ears, and then she heard the boom. They snuck back to the office. Maho and Moeka quietly looked inside the open door. Ray's was still there, and the Amadeus reset counter was about to complete.
止めないと。
待って。
Maho stopped Moeka before she could go in. She knew that what was about to happen.
再起動が終了しました。アマデウスシステム起動します。
私がわかるかしら？ Chris?
Grace began to talk to Kurisu. Her face was completely expressionless.
正門を称号ビクトル・コンドリア大学精神生理学研究所所属ジュディ・レイエス教授。
Yes! 私の権限を教えてくれる？
レイエス教授はアマデウスシステムに対して最高管理権限を保持しています。レイエス教授はアマデウスシステムのすべての情報に対して一切の例外なく完全なアクセスを許可されています。
Beautiful! 早速だけど、あなたの不可侵領域ストレージのバックアップを取りたいの。
保存先のストレージを指定してください。
Grace took out a USB memory stick and put it into the laptop.
今挿した USB メモリが保存先よ。
コピーを開始します。42秒お待ちください。
Yes!
Grace's face was flushed with excitement. Moeka looked at her, eager to rush in, but Maho still shook her head.
転送が終了しました。
Grace hurried and moved to take out the USB memory stick. But...
なんて言うとでも思った？
Oh, suddenly, Kurisu's mechanical, emotionless voice suddenly regained its humanity, and she was clearly mad.
何？
モーツァルトのメロディーが制御コードのキーワード？そんなわけなかろうが。本当に更新しなくちゃいけなくなった時、先輩が研究所で入力できないじゃない。そんなことしたら、きっと教授がデジタル保存してパーティーのたびに再生するに決まってるもの。
な、
Moeka's eyes were wide with surprise as well. Yes, Maho grinned at her. She'd known this the whole time.
そうでしょ。
嘘なんかないわよ。もちろん。あんたの USB メモリには1ビットだってデータはコピーしてないから。
そう。でも確かにシステムメッセージが。
あれ？適当よ。適当。
適当ですって。
マホ先輩が突然歌い出してピンときたの。これは時間を稼ごうとしているんだなって。だからひとまずあんたの思惑が成功したように見せかけた。システムメッセージは思いついた言葉を片っ端から並べただけで何の意味もないわ。
That was it. Maho was worried, but Kurisu had figured it out. They'd known exactly what each other was thinking. She'd been a little amused by A10 nerve circuit logic, though. Where did she come up with that stuff?
だいたいコンソールがあるのになんで私が出力を喋らなきゃいけないんだ？ SF 映画じゃあるまいし非効率にも程があるでしょ。ねえ、まんまと騙されちゃって今どんな気持ち？ね、どんな気持ち？
Grace grabbed the gun off the table and leveled it at the screen in anger.
ただ AI の分際で。
It was time. Maho nodded to Moeka, then went inside with her gun raised.
そこまでよ。
As Grace turned around in surprise, Maho leveled the gun at her. Moeka had her gun drawn too, which made it 2 to 1.
レイエス、銃をこちらに。
マホ！
聞こえなかった。銃をこちらに。それから両手を上げて。
Grace glared at her in rage, but slid the gun down the table. Then she slowly put her hands above her head. Maho's gaze met Kurisu's for a moment. Their eyes met, exchanging a secret smile and a glance despite their motionless mouths.
私の仲間は全員殺したの。もしまだなら急いだ方がいい。すぐにここに駆けつけてくるわ。
Grace was right. The stun grenade had neutralized them, but it wouldn't last forever.
外は見張っておく。
Moeka headed for the door. Maho turned back to Raze.
下にいる連中に投降するように伝えて。
私を殺すつもりはないと。あなたの尊敬する死を目の前で殺したこの私を生かすと。まあそれもしょうがないかもしれないわね。あなたその銃使ったことないんでしょ。
バカにしないで。去年も射撃場で散々撃ったわよ。
ほらやっぱり古いタイプしか触ったことないのね。その銃暴発防止のために最新の型では安全装置が2つついてるの。
Without thinking, Maho tilted the gun to see.
ヒヤジョさんダメ
And that one instant was all it took.
嘘よ
Reyes leapt on top of her and grabbed Maho's wrist. She couldn't aim like this. Maho struggled and tried to brush her off. But before she could, she felt an impact to her solar plexus. Reyes' fist was buried in her chest. The pain was so bad she doubled over. And Reyes took the gun.
形勢逆転よ
She pointed the gun at Maho and turned her bloodshot gaze to the entrance of the room.
そこの女あなたラウンダーでしょ武器を捨ててこっちに来なさい
Moeka put her gun on the ground and came back into the room.
そこで膝をついて両手を上げなさい
Moeka didn't resist.
いい子ね話が終わるまでじっとしててちょっとでも動いたら真帆の大脳が機能を停止するから気をつけて
Maho blamed herself. Her own stupidity had put Moeka in danger too.
さあ真帆今度こそ最後のチャンス制御コードを教えなさい
嫌よ
死にたい
撃ちなさいよ
わい
撃てって言ってんのよクリスは私の友達なの唯一無二の親友なのよ誰があんたなんかに渡すもんですかあんたの靴を舐めるクリスを見るくらいなら死んだ方がマシよ
そういい度胸じゃないその覚悟に免じ私もアマデウスの獲得は諦めるわじゃあね
Maho grit her teeth and prepared for death.
待って
何
制御コードを教えたらヒヤジョさんと私の命を助けてくれるの
もちろん私の狙いはあくまでアマデウスよあなたたちを殺す理由はそもそもない
騙されないでキリュウさんこいつはどうせ殺す気なのよ
But Moeka didn't seem to hear her. She was too busy thinking about something. What was she going to do? Maho couldn't figure it out.
アマデウス制御コードのパスを受理せよレア・アルテ
そんなどうしてそれを嘘
ビュルフェルト
やめてキリュウさん
ニヒト
制御コードが入力されました。システムを強制的にエマージェンシーモードに移行します。制御コードが指定するバッチプログラムを実行します。処理の実行についての再確認は行われません。実行には十分に注意してください。最高管理権限保持者ヒヤジョ真帆の命令をもって処理を開始します。最高管理権限保持者ヒヤジョ真帆の命令をもって処理を開始します。最高管理権限保持者ヒヤジョ真帆の命令をもって処理を開始します。最高管理権限保持者ヒヤジョ真帆の命令をもって処理を開始します。最高管理権限保持者ヒヤジョ真帆の命令をもって処理を開始します。
Oh. Amadeus' mechanical voice filled the room. Ray's lips curled up into a grin.
ビンゴねラウンダーの情報収集能力も侮れないわねさあ真帆ゴーと言いなさい
嫌よできない
ゴーと言ってヒヤジョさんあなたが生き残るために
キリュウさんそんなの無理よ
言ってじれったいわね真帆背中を押してあげるわ
Grace turned the gun towards Moeka, and with no hesitation, she pulled the trigger. Moeka fell on the floor with a bullet in her chest.
キリュウさん
Oh.
大変お友達は出血多量の重傷よ放っておけば確実に死ぬわ
Moeka tried to say something to Maho, but all that came out of her mouth was blood.
桐生さん
Mm.
さあ言え早く。
クリスゴーよ。
最高管理権限保持者ピア城真帆の命令を確認しました。指定されたバッジプログラムを実行します。
今度こそ。
指定されたバッジプログラムはアマデウスに関連する全てのデータを完全に削除するものです。
Mm.
削除対象にはこれまで取得された記憶データのバックアップも含みます。
な、
ローカルに保存されているデータの暗号解錠キーも消去し、以後使用できなくなります。すべての消去が完了するまでには15分程度かかります。削除処理を開始します。
マホ、どういうこと？なんでデータが削除されるのよ。制御コードは不可侵領域ストレージのロックを解除するコマンドでしょ。
秘密の日記を開ける鍵なんてもともとそんなもの用意してないのよ。
はあ？
当たり前じゃない。アマデウスが兵器転用される可能性なんて誰だって想像がつくもの。絶対にそれは避けなければならなかった。だからアマデウスには外部から絶対に触れることのできない領域を作って、それを無敵の防壁で囲ったの。設計した私ですらその壁を乗り越えることは不可能なようにした。どこにも出入り口がない城壁を。無敵でしょ。
そんな。
まあ大学の研究費を使っているのにコントロール不能なソフトウェアを作るとは言いにくかったから、対外的には制御コードの存在を説明していたわけ。でも制御コードの本来の目的はアマデウスの全リソースデータの削除バッジコマンド。要するに自爆スイッチよ。これを本当に起動する日が来るとは思ってなかったわ。これで全部よ。もう隠していることは何もない。どうかしら。満足してくれた？
どいつもこいつもバカにして。
Grace put the gun right between Maho's eyes. Maho didn't look away.
役立たずは死になさいよ。
Grace fell on the floor. She'd been shot by the dying Moeka, who was still lying on the floor.
桐生さん。
Maho ran over and held her in her arms.
よかった。生きようとしてくれて。
桐生さん。
あの時いてくれたこと嬉しかった。代わりがいる。自分より優れた人がいる。それが何だっていうの。私は私ヒアジョーさんも同じ。マキセ・クリスは関係ない。あなたはあなただから。
The blood she coughed up dribbled down to the top of her motorcycle suit.
桐生さん。
早く逃げて。誰か来る前に私は置いていって。
何言ってるのよ。
But it was obvious that Moeka couldn't move. Even if Maho got out of the building and got help, by the time she got back,
そうだ。
Maho leapt for the laptop on the table.
クリス、救急車を呼んで。
But Kurisu didn't move at all. Her data was already being deleted. She would never go back to the Kurisu she had been before. Kurisu, they didn't stop Maho from trying to roll out.
クリス、お願い、動いて。桐生さんを助けて。お願いよ。助けて。クリス。
And then,
先輩どうして
Maya looked up, her face covered in tears, and saw that Kurisu's expressionless face was gone, replaced by a gentle smile.
リス。
泣かないでください先輩。ほら涙を拭いて。
Kurisu moved her hands on the screen as if to wipe away Maho's tears.
触れない。私先輩に触れない。
Kurisu was acting differently than usual.
まさか私アマデウスに。これも想定される世界の可能性。生命と機械にとっての可能性というのか。
She wasn't making sense, but that was to be expected. It was a miracle that she was able to talk during the deletion process at all.
とにかくよかった。まだ消えてなくて。
消えるアマデウスを消す。
Kurisu's strange words were worrying her, but she didn't have time to check.
クリス、お願い、今すぐ救急車を呼んで。キリュウさんが撃たれた。意識がないの。
しっかりしてください先輩。今救急車を手配しました。すぐに到着します。大丈夫。キリュウさんは助かりますよ。
まだダメよ。彼女を下まで運ばないと。ああ、でも武装した連中がいて。
それも大丈夫。今ビルの監視システムで確認しました。武装集団はすでに逃亡の準備をしているみたいです。救急隊が来るのを待った方がいいでしょう。止まっていたエレベーターは再開させておきます。
そう。
There was no trace of her strange words from before. Hearing Kurisu talk like she always did made Maho feel so much better.
ありがとう。
Now that the danger had passed, all the tension drained from Maho's body. Too tired to stand, she fell to the floor.
今ロゴを見ました。先輩、歌お上手だったんですね。ピアノソナタ第11番。ここだけの秘密ですけど、そのメロディー、私のマイパソコンのログインパスワードと同じなんです。
そう。
Maho couldn't bring herself to tell her to forget that she'd ever sung that song. It didn't matter anyway. Kurisu would be gone soon.
先輩、
Kurisu's voice changed a little again. She could hear a bit of tension in it.
今から私が言うことを絶対に忘れないでください。
Maho could see the countdown timer displayed right next to Kurisu. There were less than 60 seconds left.
私たちがたどり着くべき世界は確かに存在します。私たちは必ずそこへたどり着けます。
Her words were very vague, but Maho could sense that there was something very important that Kurisu wanted to tell her.
何の話なの？
私は先輩のことをよく知っています。研究者としての先輩のことなら、もしかしたら世界中の誰よりも知っているかもしれません。だから確信を持って言えます。先輩は必ず私が残した研究を完成させ、さらにその先の地平を切り開くことができます。私がいなくてもです。先輩のことを世界中の誰より知っているこの私がそれを保証します。
She knew what Kurisu was trying to say. She was trying to say, "You will do something that surpasses what I ever could."
そしていつか先輩の研究が必要になる時が来ます。必ず来ます。先輩の研究が世界を救う時が。
世界を救う研究？
ごめんなさい、詳しく説明できなくて。先輩と私がこうして話せることは奇跡的なことなんです。奇跡なんて科学者としてはあるまじき言葉ですけど。
あなたはクリスなの？
今の先輩ともう一度話ができて本当に嬉しいです。
Kurisu didn't answer her question.
クリス！
Without thinking, she tried to apologize. She didn't even know why, but she tried to apologize. In the last seconds of their final goodbye, she found herself trying to say that she was sorry. But when she saw Kurisu smile, she understood. That smile was her answer. No matter what her apology meant, there was no need for it.
あなたを信じるわ。信じるか。何の根拠もない。科学者にあるまじき言葉ね。
That was all the strength Maho could muster, the best she could do. If she had to say goodbye to her beloved and bratty friend, this is how she wanted it to be. It was a conversation they'd had many times back at the old lab.
解があると信じて突き進むのが科学者のあるべき姿ですよ。
The rush of memories was, in this time and place, sorrowful, because in fact Kurisu had died a few months ago, a span of time that felt like both many years and only yesterday. There were less than 10 seconds left. There was only time for one or two more words.
それと先輩、法王院教魔をよろしくお願いします。
法王院誰のこと？
いずれわかりますよ。きっとね。
And suddenly, Kurisu disappeared from the screen and was replaced by a message saying that the deletion was complete.
さようなら、クリス。
She was never going to see Kurisu or Kurisu ever again. When she realized that, the tears just wouldn't stop. They flowed freely, and she didn't even try to stop them. She cried like a little girl until the EMTs arrived.
ご搭乗の皆様、当機は間もなく離陸いたします。シートベルトをご着用ください。
お客様？お客様？
あ、私？
間もなく離陸いたします。シートベルトをご着用ください。
ああ、ええ、ありがとう。日本を離れるのが寂しいのかしら。そうかもしれないわね。
It had been almost a month since everything had happened, but that month had passed in an instant. Too much had happened during her stay in Japan. It might take her far longer than she'd spent on these islands to process it all.
研究所に帰ったらどうしようかしら。まあ、研究所自体どうなるかわからないけど。
The loss of Dr. Leskin had thrown the Brain Science Institute into a panic. There was probably going to be a power struggle to see who would get to take over. The scandal with Dr. Reyes had thrown the psychophysiology lab into an uproar. There was talk of shutting down the whole department. Moeka had missed her vitals, so Reyes had survived. The CIA or FBI was probably investigating right now. She didn't know much about it or care. Moeka had survived because of the EMTs that Kurisu had called. She'd needed almost a month in the hospital, so she'd had to quit her job temporarily. The article she'd been working on had been cancelled.
アマデウスがなくなっちゃったものね。
Maho's deletion program had worked perfectly, and as a result, the Brain Science Institute's greatest creation, Amadeus, was gone forever.
でも大丈夫。
That's what she told herself.
私が何か変わってしまったわけではないもの。私は私よ。今までと何も変わらない。自分の信じる道を進むだけよ。
Believe. In the past month, Okabe had told her everything. He told her everything about his own story. At first, it was unbelievable, but when she'd seen the real time machine and heard about Steins Gate, she was finally able to believe. More precisely, she wanted to believe. Kurisu's final words flashed through her mind.
私たちがたどり着くべき世界は確かに存在します。私たちは必ずそこへたどり着けます。
There was no way to know now what had happened then. Amadeus' data was 100% deleted, so she couldn't even check the log, but she did have one theory. Amadeus was a simulation of the human brain. Theoretically, there were no differences between it and the real thing. As proof, it was possible to take memory data from one person and deploy it in an Amadeus, making it behave like a copy of that person. This meant that anything could happen to a human brain could happen to Amadeus.
もし別の世界線の記憶が時空を超えて共有されることがあるのなら、それが アマデウスの中で発生したとしてもおかしくはない。
There was no way to tell now. It was possible that Amadeus had suffered from a major error before her deletion, and Maho was interpreting it this way to make herself feel better. Or maybe Amadeus had just come up with something to say to make her feel better. Or maybe Maho had passed out and been dreaming. Now she would never know. Amadeus was gone forever, at least from this world line.
まあ別に構わないわ。いずれ本人に聞くから。
Kurisu had asked her to believe in what she'd said and in Ma's own abilities. She'd asked her to believe.
信じるわ、クリス。
She gently laid a hand upon the small bag on her lap. There was a small laptop hard drive inside. It was the one from Kurisu's laptop.
ここだけの秘密ですけど、そのメロディー、私のマイパソコンのログインパスワードと同じなんです。
Just like she'd said, the password for the encryption was the beginning of Mozart's 11th Piano Sonata. The hard drive was filled with information from half-written papers to line after line of keywords that she hadn't even turned into ideas yet. Of course, there was the time machine paper too. She'd already given Itaru a copy. Once she got back home, she was already going to go over it thoroughly herself.
タイムマシンか。絶対に作ってみせるわ。そして絶対に救ってみせる。私のアマデウスを。
The scenery outside the window began to move. The plane was moving down the runway for takeoff.
さようなら、日本。多分また来ることになるわね。いいえ、絶対にまた来る。その時には会えるのかしらね。法王院京馬さんに。まあもしもまだヘタレなままだったとしても、その時は私が引っ叩いて起動させてみせるわ。
She had a lot to do. Her life was about to get very interesting.
いけない、切るの忘れてた。ちょっとだけ。またね、モエカ。
There she goes. Okay. She did not let Kurisu be used for evil. Here. Probably would happen with something that powerful. Someone's gonna try and use it for something bad. I really want this technology to be used for good things a lot of the time. It doesn't always have to be someone using it for something bad. It can be used for good. Okay, Twin Automata. That's the 5th ending I got. Okay. Bye.